So I've been using this camera for over 2 years for mostly photography and shooting some video work. I've done weddings with this camera, I've shot real estate, I've done many family portraits with this Canon EOS R, and so today I wanted to give a review. This review is for people that are looking for an entry-level Canon R series camera. So my setup typically was a Canon EF 35mm lens, which was a 1.4L version, the second one, on an RF to EF adapter, and this was my main setup for portrait shooting. And I carry this with me throughout all of my gigs, and also whenever I went traveling. I also had the Tamron 17 to 35mm, the f2.8 to f4 for video work. So I had these two main lenses as my combination because I like a 35mm focal length for portraits. And here I'll talk about some of the pros that I had with this camera. Before I bought this camera, I had the Canon 5D Mark III, and that was a bulky DSLR dinosaur of a camera, which had a little bit of weight to carry with it. Didn't really have this flip out LCD screen that this camera has. So when I was doing a lot of my shoots, I would notice that I would have trouble focusing with the 5D Mark III. However, when I first bought this Canon EOS R, I found that shooting portraits was so easy. Like during my first photo shoot session, all I could say was, this is so easy. Like the face detection autofocus feature on this camera is so good that almost 99% of the time I will get accurate shots. And I really like that they put the eye detection in there, which is something that was carried over from the 5D Mark IV. It just makes photo shoots very efficient when you don't have to worry about the focus of your subjects. My second pro with this camera was very lightweight and efficient. I loved carrying it with me. You can simply just like hold it with one hand rather than, you know, just like carrying around this huge DSLR camera that I had. There was also this flip out LCD screen, which is very useful, and I chose this camera over the Sony a7 III because the a7 III didn't have this flip out LCD screen. That was something that was sort of like a deal breaker for me, was that I needed something that was that had this LCD flip out screen so that I can also vlog in the future whenever I do videos. I find that using the Canon mirrorless systems, it's very easy to learn and it's user friendly. I think this camera is great for digital photography. So if you're looking to get images that are super sharp, then I highly recommend this camera for you. I will talk about the cons that I have with this camera. And one of them is that it doesn't have some of like the premium features that the R5 and the R6 have, which is the dual card slots, which is super important because you want to be able to save your footage onto two different SD cards. This is in case one of your cards corrupts on a shoot, such as a wedding, for example. And also, it doesn't have that joystick that the 5D Mark series has. Back then, I used to love just kind of like messing with that and knowing which spots that I would want in focus instead of using the touchscreen for the Canon EOS R. And also, I noticed when I recorded video in low light situations, such as at night or in a dark space, I would notice that anything above ISO 2000 started to get really grainy and noisy footage, and it doesn't really look good in post because whenever I would try to recover the shadows, it would almost sort of like break the image. I haven't used any clips that were high ISO, and those clips didn't really end up being usable for me. But just as another caveat, if you wanted to shoot video, is you have to be aware of like the limited ISO capabilities. So most people, when they switch over to the Canon mirrorless systems, they would still need to use their EF lenses. So what I used typically was the RF to EF adapter, and this was okay for me because I was still into doing photography, but once I got into video, I started to see that there were some problems. One of those problems was that whenever I put a heavy EF lens, like such as the 2470, it started to get really front heavy, whenever I would place it on a gimbal. Usually that's a disadvantage because you want to be able to be as fast and efficient as possible whenever you're trying to balance it. So I would say finding a good RF lens for this camera would be essential. And another con I had with this camera is that video is decent, however it's not up to par as all the other newer cameras out there. For its 4K capabilities, it can only shoot up to 30 frames per second, so it only has up to 1080p and 60 frames per second, which is okay for a social media post. Also, the big thing about the Canon EOS R is the 4K crop. So another workaround that I had with the 4K crop was I used the Viltrox speed booster. So what the speed booster does is it gets rid of the crop for you and then also allows your lens to open up the aperture more. So if I were to buy this camera all over again with 2 lenses, what I would buy depending on your style of shooting, so say like if you wanted to do portraits but also do a little bit of vlogging on the side, what I would buy is the RF 50mm 1.8, and that's the nifty 50. I would also get the RF 14mm to 35mm f4 version. It's still worth the price if you're looking to get something that's like a wide angle zoom, but it doesn't really stop down to like something wide such as f2.8, but it's still good enough if you want to do something like real estate, videography, or if you want to just vlog during the day. And f4 should be good enough for most all-around videography work. So why I don't use the Canon EOS R nowadays is because I'm heavily invested into videography work and I want to get serious into more filmmaking, so I need a camera that has better video capabilities. And I'm not saying that the Canon EOS R is bad at video. In fact, it does record HD up to 60 frames per second, as I mentioned before, and it's good enough for social media posts such as YouTube and Instagram. So there are some alternatives out there with this camera. If you don't choose to buy the Canon EOS R, there is the newer version of Canon's mirrorless system that's coming out, and that's the R8. So the R8 is basically like an upgraded version of the Canon EOS R, which looks really similar, except it doesn't have that 4K crop and it can shoot up to 60 frames per second. The other camera that came out with this one around the same time, which is a Canon RP, is a good choice as well. And if you wanted to go up a little higher in the professional realm for shooting with Canon mirrorless cameras, I would also recommend the Canon R6 and the R5 cameras. Overall, this camera is a good entry-level hybrid camera, meaning it can be good at shooting tack-sharp photos as well as having video capabilities. So I hope that this video helps you in making a decision on what camera to buy. If you found value from listening to this review and you thought that this video was helpful, please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'll be coming out with more reviews such as this, so stay tuned for the next video and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers!